Parliament in a much-needed historic step, passed the 99th Constitutional Amendment Bill, paving way for the National Judicial Commission. There was unprecedented support. The Lok Sabha unanimously voted in its favor.
Confrontation, which is unfortunately building up, does not augur well for the constitutional scheme. And therefore, I had given a notice under Rule 184, an adjournment notice, to have a detailed discussion.
इससे जो कांग्रेस पार्टी और हम में फर्क है ना, कांग्रेस पार्टी जैसा काम करते थे हम वैसे नहीं कर सकते.
All right, this is a full-blown confrontation between the judiciary and the executive. The question is, who will mind the judges? Of course, the judges mind everything because, after all, every law that is passed by Parliament has to stand the test of law, has to stand the test of judicial scrutiny. But what about the appointment of judges? Joining us now on the talking point this evening, Justice B.A. Khan is former Chief Justice of the Jammu and Kashmir High Court. Arima Sundaram will be joining us, Senior Advocate in the Supreme Court. Sanya Talwar is Editor of Law Beat. Adil Singh Bopara is an advocate and spokesperson of the Congress Party. Let me start with you, Justice B.A. Khan. You know, in principle, no one has a problem with the existing system, the Collegium system. It has worked well. It has worked well for a number of years. I think the issue is, what the government is asking is, if in every other domain of appointments, from appointments in the government, appointments in the legislature, appointments, of course, even in the Election Commission, which the judges had a few things to say about a few weeks ago, if the judges can weigh in on all of that, why shouldn't government, a popularly elected government, which is the basic principle of democracy, why shouldn't they have a say in judges who are appointed to senior positions either in high courts or in the Supreme Court?
Zaka, but who says is that government doesn't have a hand? They are the movers and shakers. And they start sharing it from the day go. The very stage when the appointment process starts, government shares it somehow or the other, that one knows who goes through that experience. But when you look at it superficially at the highest level, how does one think that government doesn't have a hand? Don't you see that the government sits on the proposals for 6 months, 7 months, and that is the cause for delay of appointments? Don't you see that the Collegium recommendations, even if reiterated, are returned? Now, this is not, see, for example, let me tell you the actual process. Actual process is for High Court judge, when a process is initiated, that process goes through government at two levels. It goes through the Chief Minister, it goes through the Governor, then it reaches the Central Law Ministry, and then after that it goes to the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
Now, at every stage, you have either interventions or suggestions, or you may call it whatever, maybe by the Chief Minister or maybe by the Governor. And unless it is approved politically, much of it doesn't go through. So to say that the government has no share in appointments is only looking at it superficially.
No, but Justice Khan, my point was, you also agree that these 6 months delay, 7 months delay, maybe sometimes even a year's delay, is perhaps caused by the fact that the government it does not, have a say, or not have a say, but the government's choice is not endorsed by the judges, by the Collegium, as it were.
That is not true. Practically on ground, in consultations, they share who the candidates are and who should get cleared and who should not get cleared. So those are the back channel talks, as you call them. So it's not that. It is happening everywhere, but this is the only problem today is that what I see is that there is a pattern to take away this collegial system from the Supreme Court and appropriate it to the executive.
Okay, to come up with an NJAC-like system. But let me ask Arima Sundaram, who's joining us today, what the court said was pretty scathing in its observations. where a bench headed by Justice Sanjay Kishan Kaul basically said that Parliament has the power to enact laws. The government can ask the Parliament to lay down a new law. No one can prohibit it. You want to bring in a new law, gather consensus, you can always do that. However, you may have to then stand the scrutiny of a challenge. The scheme of the Constitution requires the court to be the final arbiter on the position of a law as enacted by Parliament. Now, yes, of course, no one is taking away the rights of the Supreme Court to see if a law that's passed is constitutional or not, or stands the test of judicial scrutiny. But if you have a popularly elected government, and in a democracy, whether you like it or not, that is a reflection of the will of the people. And if the will of the people has passed a law, then should the judiciary have the final say on it, as Justice Kaul may be indicating in the statement that he made?
Well, to say anything contrary to what Justice Kaul said would be to rewrite the entire Constitution of India and the very concept of modern democracy. Let's understand what is modern democracy. Modern democracy has as its very basic fulcrum what is known as the separation of powers. By the separation of powers, you have the executive and the judiciary, and in a case where the legislature is a totally separate body, the legislature, and each has its scope of activity. Now, under our Constitution and under the Constitution of most countries, including the United States of America, which everyone likes to tout about, the American Supreme Court also, well, the fact is that the final arbiter as to whether a law is constitutionally valid or not is the courts. So what Justice Kaul said today is nothing really different than what the law as we know it is, and not only the law as we know it. Starting from 1215 AD in the Magna Carta, the concept of the rule of law. Now, it doesn't mean that just because there is a majority, and the majority decides at that given time to do something which is against the Constitution, that the court cannot interfere with it at all. That is not so at all, nor is it the basis of our Constitution. Our Constitution makes the Supreme Court the final arbiter, and in fact goes one step
that's
further.
In the process of lawmaking and adjudicating upon that law. If I may, Mr. Sundaram, on the question of appointment of judges, if the US Supreme Court, the judges are appointed by the executive, the same thing is followed in the UK and other major democracies around the world, why should a popularly elected executive, a popularly elected government not have a say in the appointment of judges in high courts and in the Supreme Court of this country?
Well, the reason is very simple. When the case of Gupta came up and this whole guidelines was laid down and the law interpreted and the Collegium system introduced, there was a feeling that the executive at that time was interfering in the course of justice by cherry-picking, hand-picking judges as per their choice. And perhaps if people were not felt to be more, let me say, more academically or more through policy or belief against what the policy or the belief of the government was, the government of that day, and we're going back to 1994,
okay,
the government of that day felt that, look, we don't want such a person as a judge.